What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and coming off of this loss, right, abysmal. Everything that could have possibly went wrong. Tyrod Taylor going out, throwing Brady Cook into the fire, right? You're talking limited practice reps and all kind of stuff. Breece Hall, game plan wasn't set up with him with how much time and explosive plays the Dolphins were able to chew up and crank out. You talk about the wide receivers, tight ends, dropping everything under the sun. You talk about the offensive line being leaky with 6 sacks, tons of more pressure, and I would imagine the number is somewhere between 60 and 70% of our passing snaps, the way that it looked. And then when you want to talk about defensively, all you can say is missed assignments and lack of discipline, right? Of course, our turnover less interception streak continues as well, and much like Aaron Glenn reiterated during his press conference, this was just essentially trash from top to bottom, right? And it comes down ultimately to him, the game plan, the preparation, the situational football that he tried to put them in. Obviously, recreating what the Dolphins do is extremely hard with their commitment to, their speed, explosive players. But still, this was a situation where it just felt like we were unmatched from the get-go, right? And at this point, special teams does feel like it's over half of our offense when we aren't able to get things clicking there, which has to get fixed. And it's a lot having to rely on the UDFA. And I got a whole separate video I'm throwing out for Brady Cook because there was some interesting things that came out of this game, but just really tough to see, really tough to watch. I mean, looking at the Dolphins' ground game, it felt like whether it was A-Chain or whether it was Jalen Wright, it didn't really matter. Every time they touched the ball, it felt like they were ripping off 8, 9, 10-yard chunk plays. So I think we gave up somewhere in the realm of 250 rushing yards on the day. Tua looked like, the 2023 version, I think it was, where he was leading the league in passing, just throwing dots all over the place, letting guys make plays. Pretty embarrassing overall, especially considering, how the Dolphins are generally viewed playing in the cold. But I don't want to focus on the details of the game as much as the comments that Aaron Glenn made, right? Because when I looked at the press game conference, a lot of people, I don't know what many fans expected here, right? When you take a loss, it doesn't matter if it's a blowout, if it's a close game, or, a 10-point loss. Anything of that ilk doesn't really matter as much. But when we're frustrated, right, when you're talking about losing streaks, or when you're talking about a franchise like ours that has consistent losing seasons, consistent playoff less football, it does start to raise eyebrows and questions, right? Aaron Glenn, I think, handled this one as well as any press conference that we've seen from him in a loss, right? Ultimately, it came down to him putting everything on his shoulders, didn't have the team prepared. In this type of loss, there was nothing to be excited or really even get hyped about, right? So I love the fact that he was just straight to the point, owned up to the fact that this team isn't hitting the standard that he wants, and that he's going to find a way to still continue to try to get those solutions in place. And half of this conversation is obviously both sides of the ball don't have the necessary traits, players, talent that they're looking for. And the reporters did try to kind of coax that out of him, right? In terms of is the talent level there that he needs to be able to achieve success? And he was able to brush that off pretty professionally. But I was perfectly fine with the response, right? Loved everything, got out of there, didn't really fight or get combative with the media too much. Let's focus on football. Let's focus on, what we have ahead. I think the Patriots Thursday night game is what we're looking at next potentially, right? Or we might be talking about the Jags game here. I can't remember the schedule off the top of my head. But What intrigued me the most is we've been talking about culture throughout the entirety of this season, and what does it look like, right? It's not something that's always necessarily tangible. It's not something you always necessarily even see from a field perspective, right? But it's the stuff that's kind of going in the background, and you would love for some of that to translate to the field. But hearing Jamien Sherwood's comments directly refuting Aaron Glenn, right, and kind of stepping up, a player that's been heavily scrutinized this season, but still earned the contract, walked into this year as a captain, it intrigued me, right? So Jamien Sherwood said, as a leader, that's what leaders tend to do. And he's talking about Aaron Glenn in the comments here. I just feel like as a coach, he did what he needed to do this week. He gave us the keys to victory. We had a great week of practice. He set us up in the right formations. All our position coaches did what they had to do. Us as a team, us as players, when we step in those white lines, there's no more coaching at that point. AG can't save us, linebacker coach, whatever the case may be. We've got to go out there and perform every Sunday. And today we didn't uphold the standard. And this is key to me, right? Now, it would have been very easy, especially on a loss like this, for players to get antsy, players to get agitated based on similar questions that would probably make Aaron Glenn's head explode. The players even have less reason to necessarily stay professional, because at the end of the day, it is them going out there to perform and try to make sure that what the coaches have done translates to the field. And Jamien Sherwood is the next closest thing to a Quentin Williams when it comes to you'll never audibly get, a bad comment out of him, essentially, right? You might get some explosions on the field. You might get some combativeness with the coaches on the field. You might maybe get some finger pointing from the cameras that are out there, whatever the case is, but he always tries to put his best foot forward out there, and it's something that is underappreciated, but definitely a necessity within every locker room here. And it's hard to say that you want to take his words with a grain of salt or have a ton of value in them, but they're still pivotal. Right? They're still key because, again, in this kind of loss, there would be a lot of finger pointing going on. It's very easy for the rare situation where special teams is beating out offense and defense, right? It'd be very easy for a lot of these backup players to look at these starters and think, I could be doing better in these roles right now, but I'm relegated to special teams, and there to be a huge crack, a huge fault in the locker room here, and none of that's really taken place. But this is also one of the first times that you really heard the players stepping up outside of some of these player-led, secret meetings and stuff that came up earlier in the season. It's the first time that someone really stepped up to say, no, the staff has done what it needed to do. We aren't doing what we need to do. And that does point the direction of the conversation now to, you can look at it on film based on what they're asking a lot of these players to do. Some of these guys really just aren't living up to it, right? Maybe they thought they could figure it out. Maybe they thought that they can get by with it. But Jamien Sherwood's a prime example, right? When Michael Clemens, a prime example, right? It's just not it. The message, the coaching, the techniques that's being taught, these guys just aren't being able to do it with consistency, and in plenty enough cases aren't able to do it consistent at all, right? And so that I do expect a ton more turnover, right? At this point, and I talked about it in maybe the last video that I did, there's probably 10 jobs that maybe should be classified as safe, and realistically, I'd push that number to single digits, right? For me, my list will probably be, and I mean safe in terms of I have, minimal to no questions about this player and what I'm expecting and or projecting them to do, right? And that list probably goes Garrett Wilson. It probably goes Breece Hall. And it probably goes Armand Mimbu. Maybe you include Joe Tippmann in that. Maybe you include Brandon Stevens now, the way he turned it around. And two or three of these players already there could be some arguments for, right? So you're talking about not even having complete faith in a full starting 11, regardless of if it's a combination of offense and defense. So there's a lot that's needed, right? Double dipping at position shouldn't be out of the question. Spending a lot of this at 100+ million surplus in cap space we're going to have this offseason shouldn't be out of the question when you want to talk about targeting whoever the premium players at the premium positions are going to be. Any manner of trades for the right player at the right position, and specifically quarterback just comes to my mind here, shouldn't be out of question, right? The hard line that Aaron Glenn is going to have to walk is not salvaging any of the 2027 draft picks for 2026 success if you're not going to get the quarterback, because then your selling point is, I can win enough to show that the infrastructure has been built and I just need to insert in this quarterback, and we should have limited growing pains in 2027. Based on how this season worked out, even though there's been a couple high points, some small, minute levels of consistency, it's not good enough to where anybody should feel good about their jobs going in, right? And to me, I think about, I'll probably do a separate video on this as well, right? But I take a look at like Sean Jefferson, the wide receiver coach, in terms of we've had, 3-ish years, I believe now, of experience with him, and who has he really developed outside of Garrett Wilson, who you can say was already good walking into the year, his rookie year anyways. You look at people like the running back coach. Obviously, he's new, coming in from college, all that kind of stuff. But running back should be one of the easier positions to step in and have some level of success with. You take a look at defensively, there could be arguments for a lot of these guys and what we're seeing, right? And specifically a lot of the secondary coaches. Obviously, we're expecting Steve Wilkes to potentially not return. But you look at the cornerback safeties coach, right? What's happening there to where we can't grab interceptions? What's happening there? I think everything else you can still see improvements with, right? These guys being around the ball, specifically a lot of these cornerbacks being able to fly and help in run support, etc. But everything's just not marrying quite the way that you want it to, right? And I think seeing this loss against this Dolphins team, for example, who also once upon a time was probably battling us to be the basement team of the AFC East. So to see such a disparity in between two teams that as a whole are definitely performing poorly, at least against expectations, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow for the coaching staff, right? So obviously Woody Johnson's watchful eye is all over the place, but I do look at Jamien Sherwood's comments as a silver lining here, a small sign of success that Aaron Glenn is at least establishing that he's going to have a player-led locker room, right? Obviously, things go in lockstep with what he wants, but we've heard these players repeating a lot of not just his catchphrases or anything like that, but really a lot of the mentality, really a lot of the personality of Aaron Glenn, which I consider to be a good thing. But hearing them kind of take the onus, I wouldn't be surprised if we get news of another secret meeting popping up or anything like that here. But let me know what you guys think, not just about Jamien Sherwood's comments, but what were your takeaways from this Dolphins blowout game for us? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.